Today we've got questions on Aristotle, French succession, and the depths of Italian-American culture. Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu, now being broadcast and podcast on the Crusade Channel. Talk radio the way it should be at crusadechannel.com. I'm your host, Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with a privileged Charles Coulombe.
Privileged?
Yeah, big time.
You mean like a country club?
Yeah, like hanging with the Habsburgs, man.
Like the Veiled Prophet Ball in St. Louis.
That's right, exactly like that.
Like the crew of Comus and the crew of Rex at Mardi Gras in New Orleans.
Absolutely.
Like the Somerset Club and the Union Club in Boston, or the Knickerbocker Club in New York. Is that what you're saying?
All elitist, racist, and sexist organizations.
You mean like the Nation or Commonweal?
Well, you know,
or America? America Magazine, L'Osservatore Romano?
I feel those are reputable publications.
Reputable to who? I mean, what?
Those in power?
They are privileged. Actually, I'm going to give you a real definition of privilege.
Okay.
Anybody, and this definition, by the way, would exclude the Nation, America, Commonweal, and Osservatore Romano from being called privileged. So they should be happy with what I'm about to say, because I know they would angrily reject the fact that it's mostly white people writing this crap, white people from wealthy backgrounds writing this crap. I think they would be happy to be excluded from organizations of the sort that we've touched on. So, you know what it is to be privileged?
What?
To have an IQ higher than your age. And if you do, then you're too privileged to be writing that kind of crap. You know, speaking of privileged crap, if you turn on PBS, what will every program, no matter how on it is about being with the people and being a voice for the poor, what will every one of them tell you in great detail, a long line of something?
What?
This program made possible for the I and L Flounder Foundation, the Hugu Family Foundation, the Boogawawoo Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the Shoot Me Now Before I Say Anything More Foundation, etc., etc., etc. Now, where do those foundations come from?
Grassroots movement.
Yeah, that's.
I could say that with a straight face.
Grassroots organizations. The voice of the people. Yeah, that's what it is. All right. Yeah, you bet. You bet. You know, what really makes me laugh, of course, the ultra rich are bound up with all of this crap. The ongoing woke revolution. A lot of the ultra rich are, not all of them, but a lot of them are, because they're sort of ideologically poisoned. But for want of a better word, the mediocre rich, who are the ones who are really feeling the brunt of the taxes and so forth, as in California is a good example, to say nothing of the middle classes. What gets me is that it is immature a nation as we are, a nation of children, actually. The politics of envy always work. Oh, you soak the rich. Soak the rich. But you know what the problem is with soaking the rich, or trying to?
What?
You'll do one of two things. Either you'll manage to soak them and they'll be poor and you're not going to get any more money out of them. You just shot the goose that lays the golden eggs and you don't understand why you starved. Or they leave. Bye-bye. And so guess what happens to you? everything that they put money into goes away. And you're left having to accept whatever your government can shove in your snout, which generally declines as the tax base declines. Because even though they act like it's their money, it's actually stolen from other people. And as the numbers of people they can steal from decline, the services that they're able to give to their serfs decline in quality and in amount. And this is something that the products of their government school system, and often enough of their private school system, are no longer able to figure out. You know, if you destroy the tax base, if you destroy the industrial or the business or the agricultural base of an area, guess what? The money they were generating isn't generated anymore. The jobs they were generating aren't generated anymore. So you end up with a ton of poor people and a small class of people running the show. In the name of the poor people, of course. And then one day, if things keep going that way, then the ruling classes will get eaten alive, which may be what they need. Maybe if you're in charge and you're that stupid, a cannibalistic uprising is really what you need to help focus your thought and push your IQ above your age. Not that we're bitter.
Yeah, it's interesting because that envy I feel like has always been there, and it's come out in various forms. Shakespeare's tragedies are all tragedies for, or mostly the royal and the rich, right? People want to see them humbled, but obviously the structure was different back then. So there's the politics of envy are not in play.
No, I mean, envy is one of the 7 deadly sins, and it's always present alongside the other 6.
Yeah.
But the politics of envy, as we know them, are very much the creation of the late 18th, early 19th centuries. But they've just gotten more and more so. And where once upon a time, the would-be revolutionary in the 19th century attempted to use the industrial proletariat as the foot soldiers of the revolution, to be discarded, of course, and kicked into line once their new masters were in place of the old. Today, because we no longer have an industrial proletariat in the West, they do in Latin America and the Third World, but they don't have them in the First World. So the revolutionary, the nucleus, if you will, has tried to forge a new set of recruiting zones for foot soldiers. People of color, sexual minorities, women, etc., to overthrow everything that's left of the old order. But the problem is, unlike even someone like the Marx or Lenin, the current revolutionaries are so stupid and so whatever the opposite of creative is, that if they won, they'd be losing. Because what can they build out of the gibberish that excretes from their mouths? Nothing. They can say, oh, this and that is the structure of white privilege, blah, blah. Okay, great, that's nice. What can you build in this place? Oh, that's right, you can't, because you don't know how to build anything. You don't know how to do anything except complain and whine. Oh, it's also oppressive. Yeah, well, you know what? It was oppressive to me to have to learn English. But I did. I mean, it's oppressive to every Catholic parent in the United States who sends their kid to Catholic school to have to pay 2 sets of school taxes. That's oppressive. But it's the way it is. What are you going to do? God knows that every time there's been an attempt to address that particular injustice, has been shot down. The largest single cause of death among young black men in our great urban ghettos is other young black men. Who's going to address that? Who's going to try to fix it? Which of either party would even dare address it? Oh no, we'll just talk.
Well, I guess we just have to kick the can down the road, and while we're doing that, we just have to keep moving our houses up and higher up a mountain and just have them more fortified each time. I don't know.
That's it.
I
That's a
don't know.
long-term solution right there. I don't know. Well, I heard there's a have you been following this trial in Russia? Alexander Nav.
No. Tell us about it.
Not Navarrete. It's going on right now. Charles von Habsburg's daughter did a very good documentary about this guy who was a Russian dissident, and Navalny. That's it, Alexander Navalny. Yeah, he's a Russian court who sentences Alexei Navalny to a further 19 years in prison. So his Kremlin, he's been convicted of extremism charges, and he's sentenced to 19 years in prison. Now, what made me laugh about that, not that I think it's a funny thing, and it certainly tells you something about Putin's regime that he's doing it. The whole Navalny affair does not reflect well on the Russian system. But our State Department protested that this was a politically motivated legal thing. The very day that the Trumpster was indicted by our
of
own,
course. Of course.
But that's not politically motivated.
No, of course not.
No.
People mess with our It's like the tampering with elections, Russia tampering with our election, but then we pretend as if we don't have a stake or tamper with any other country. Okay, anyhow.
We never would because we're good.
Yeah, that's just boring.
Okay. Don't forget Mr. Bush Jr.'s comment about why we were attacked. They attacked us because we're good. That's what he said. That's what? What are you going to say? Infantile?
It's embarrassing.
Well, don't be too embarrassed. Because switching gears wildly, you hear the stripping of the gears as I'm switching. On a totally unrelated basis, but much more important. Today, in real time, is August the 5th, the Feast of Our Lady of the Snows, when there was a miraculous snowfall, which indicated where the Church of St. Mary Major was to be built in Rome.
I saw you commenting on a priest that the priest said it probably didn't happen on Twitter.
Well, that's not what he said. He said he knew he was going to be told it didn't happen.
Okay.
But he didn't care. And my response was to encourage him in his going against the flapping mouth people, the foot and mouth disease people. Let me see. Twitter. Do you like this X over the bird?
I don't know what that's all about. That's branding. That's I mean, maybe it's a new look, new feel. I don't know about the X. I don't know.
Branding, scorned is the one who ran. Anyway, what he said was, I know, it probably never happened. But the story of the miraculous snowfall in Rome in August, indicating a place on the Esquiline Hill where a church in honor of Our Lady was to be built, is a favorite of mine. Our Lady of the Snows, pray for us.
So when he says, I know, it probably never happened?
Yeah, that's his response to the inevitable, because, for the people with the big snouts, they'll always attack it when you bring up Our Lady of the Snows.
Oh, okay, so he's addressing...
the mouths, the big...
I see.
The big mouth people.
Okay.
Who's... they excrete their opinion out very easily. And you know how Twitter is. You always have these people yapping. So My response to it was, don't you believe it, Father. I believe Roman legends over Roman bureaucrats any day. As with St. Philomena, St. John Vianney accomplished miracles through her intercession. What have her deniers ever accomplished with their whole lives? Our Lady of the Snow is far truer than Osservatore Romano. And I don't mind saying, I kind of had another explosion, which was, I have to admit, I get more wisdom out of Old Farmer's Almanac, Yankee, and Grit these days than I do out of Osservatore Romano and Vatican Radio. And so one fellow responded, even Mad Magazine has more wisdom than Osservatore Romano. And another fellow said, the Old Farmer's Almanac even shows Sundays after Pentecost instead of ordinary time. That's true. And then another fellow asked, Grit is still a thing? Yes, it's still published. So I'm not selling Grit subscriptions, but if you want the voice of Middle America, of rural America, subscribe to Grit.
All right.
But tomorrow, or not tomorrow, but Monday the 6th, Sunday the 6th, tomorrow, is one of my favorite feasts, although it's falling on a Sunday, so I guess it'll probably get dumped. It's the Feast of the Transfiguration.
Very cool. Yeah.
I love the Transfiguration. I really do. It's a reminder of heaven. And it was sent to both our Lord and to his apostles to buck them up for the upcoming Passion.
Yeah. Well, I feel like there's so many takeaways from your messaging. But one of the things that I really like that I've incorporated into my thinking in the past 2 years is how various cathartic experiences, some various thoughts, are actually rooted in a longing for heaven. You know what I mean? Like there are various profound things that tug at your heart that relate to people, relating to things, and really that's just bound up in our longing for heaven.
Yeah. You suddenly think of a waterfall you saw when you were 10 years old. It took your breath away. Well, you wouldn't really want to be 10 years old again. And even if you went back to the waterfall, it might very well, if it was still there, it might not be as impressive as it was, or you might see it as a disillusioned adult. That was never the thing anyway. It reminded you of heaven.
Yeah. And obviously for me, what I really apply to that is just the memory of departed loved ones.
Yeah.
I mean, I notice that when you love someone a lot, you tend to idealize them, especially after they're gone. And that's interesting too. So, anyhow,
if we could treat each other today in the here and now, the way we would treat each other as we remember us when we're dead, it would be a very different thing. I mean, or to put this another way, if anybody you love could come back to you for a day, you'd be all over them like a cheap suit, which was not the case when they were alive.
Yeah.
And that is another side of our fallen nature.
Yeah. The meditating on the temporary nature of things is really good, not just for appreciating people that you like, people that you love, but I'm using it in other scenarios too in my life now, where people who perhaps are really annoying and are just sort of like involved in your life, but it's temporary. honestly. It's not a permanent thing, and because it's temporary, you can eventually get past it. And so, and also because it's temporary, it's like, well, there's no need to escalate. Like, it's just, this is a moment. It's like the thing, again, another thing that you had said where I thought of was over COVID, where people were really arguing in the Catholic world over COVID back and forth. And then you were basically saying, guys, like, this thing is going to pass. Like, I know we're stuck in this now. We're stuck in this moment, but this is going to pass. And what you don't want to do is end friendships over this stupid thing that's going to pass in a year or so. So I kind of like applied that to like other things in my life, that logic, because I thought it was really good logic. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, don't get caught up. Don't get caught up in the moment. It's just see the big picture.
Well, and here we are now, 2 years after COVID. Imagine if you had broken a really important friendship over whether or not you were going to get vaccinated or wear a mask.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole issue, nobody wants to talk about it because it's so embarrassing now. But the friendship would still be broken.
Right.
But luckily, the government have said that all friendships and other relationships that were damaged due to COVID, they're going to compensate.
That's good.
Isn't that good?
I'm gonna really.
Well, no. I'm saying.
Where's the application for that? I'm gonna really.
Well, see, I know that you fell out with Jack Frobisher over the whole thing. I know you did, and I know it's been weighing on you. I know that both you and Jack are too petty, either of you, to make the first approach. But see, now it won't matter whether you do or you don't, because you could both get compensated for the loss of the friendship by the government for what they did to you. Isn't that great?
I'm so glad the government has our back, and right before the election too. That really.
Yeah, just before.
Do you notice how these things happen right before the election all the time?
You and Jack will get your settlement checks like 2 weeks before the election.
I mean, always. This is like we use the word new normal, but I feel like this is truly the new normal. It's like, okay, it's election time. Do you want my vote or no? I mean, I thought you wanted my vote. I guess not.
On behalf of the American voter.
It's so ridiculous.
Our principles are not for sale, but they do rent at extremely reasonable prices. This message approved by Citizens for the Buyout.
All right. Are you ready to move on, or do you have other things to...
That is such a loaded term these days.
To move on. MoveOn.org. Yeah.
It's no, it's not just that. It's like closure.
You don't like the word closure?
I don't like the word closure. It's crap.
Tell me about that. Why? What do you... I feel like closure's good.
Closure isn't real. It doesn't exist. I'll give you an example of what I mean.
Wow. Okay.
I knew a fellow who ran a nursing home. And you'll be surprised, but it was filled with old and sick people. And despite their best efforts, the old and sick people would occasionally die. Well, one day, I was talking to the head of the nursing home, the late and very much lamented Jordan Fishman, who used to run a then famous nightclub in Detroit called the Chit Chat Lounge. That was a victim of the Detroit riots in '67. But that's a whole other story. Anyway, so Mr. Fishman was telling me about this woman who, when her father died, sued the place and him and a bunch of other people. Well, he died of natural causes. He was a very old man. He was very sick. And it was not a shock that he died. And they actually went through several different courts because she kept appealing. She kept getting defeated because they had done everything they possibly could. The guy died. There was no negligence on their part. There was no withholding of any kind of treatment. There was nothing. He just died. And so the first round was very nasty, but the judge said, there's nothing here to support a claim of any kind of malfeasance whatsoever. And so she appeals to the next court, and then the next. She loses at the state Supreme Court level. So Mr. Fishman runs into her in the lobby, and he says, all right, ma'am, the case is over. You've gone as far as you could. It's gone. It's done. Now, let me ask you, case after case, we showed all the proof that we had done nothing wrong. We did everything we could. What is it you want? What were you trying to get out of us? And he said to me, that woman looked at me with these really sad little girl eyes and said, I want closure. And he said, despite the circumstances, I took her in my arms and she started crying. And I said, I'm sorry, but the kind of closure you want, you can never have. It's just the way it is. I'm so very sorry, and I'm really sorry for your loss. And I was, he did. But he said, up until 2 minutes before that collapse, he couldn't stand the sight of her by that time, because she put him through all sorts of garbage. But all his resentment when she said, I want closure, and started to cry, what are you going to do?
I feel like I disagree totally with you on closure. I think you.
So you think he should have slapped her? And
no,
said,
I think your anecdote. You're taking this very specific anecdote and applying it to the entire concept and application.
To the closure community.
So,
closure community.
I mean, well, let's map out what is closure. Closure is, in my opinion, I mean, just thinking about it in the past 10 seconds, it is an earnestness, a curiosity to find out something that is unknown. And so obviously with dead people, that can be really hard. You might not be able to get closure as that person, as it happened with that person. But hey, nope, my turn to talk. But with friendships, for example, maybe a person ends a friendship or something, or there's a breakup or something. Other examples, and I've had friends who've wanted to get closure and to understand, and they've achieved that understanding, and they've gotten satisfaction by knowing the new details. And it's like, okay, it still sucks, but they've got what they were curious about.
They got closure because you told them they were losers.
No. Well, in specific examples, I guess there were certain areas of conflict, right? So it's like, oh, it's that area of conflict that was rough for me, or that area of disagreement. So it's like, okay, gotcha.
You know what's funny? I think of closure completely in terms of dead people.
That's what I figured you were doing.
Yeah, that's
of course, because it's like one last thank you, one last sorry, one last I love you. Sure.
And that, I mean, mutatis mutandis, it's like with so many people, especially when it comes to parents or spouses or children, if they die. There are three things basically that you really, at the end of the day, have to say to anybody you love deeply. And those three things are, I love you, I'm sorry, I forgive you. Which, because you screwed them over, they screwed you over. That's what we do to the people we love.
Whoa, you changed those on me.
Oh, did I?
You used to say, and I've done this, I said, thank you, or excuse me, I'm sorry, I love you, and thank you.
Oh, yeah, that too. Thank you.
So forgive you. Okay, but I could see the forgive you thing being important too.
If it depends on the relationship. I mean, I had nothing really to forgive my dad for, so all I could do was thank him.
Yeah. So in my opinion, with dead people like this, the closure thing relates to, did they know these things? Did they know how I felt? and the
Yeah.
fullness of what I felt. And
Yeah.
so obviously you gave me this bit of advice before my dad passed, and
Yeah.
I actually told, I mean, I hashed everything out. I told him this, and it was actually meaningless, like saying these things that didn't even matter, and I felt stupid saying, going through it, because really these things were totally embodied by our relationship our entire lives. So to just say that, like, oh, I love you, well, yeah, but you've shown me you've loved me for your whole life, so just saying
Yeah.
it there is that really doesn't encapsulate our relationship. So in that, for me, it was interesting. um so yeah, but dead people, it's rough. It's rough.
And with this lady, obviously, obviously she was hashing out whatever guilt she felt toward her father,
Yeah.
and figured, and probably not even consciously entirely, that she could somehow assuage that guilt by making them pay for his death.
Right. Yeah.
But there wasn't anything they could have done. And but can you imagine how embarrassing that would have been? You fought a court case against a lady for months and months. You put out tons of money. I mean, these things are really annoying to go through. And
Yeah.
then you're suddenly confronted with this drama. And as you said, minutes before, I wouldn't have, I'd have thrown a rock at her as much as anything else.
Yeah.
But in just seeing her so totally woebegone,
Yeah.
what do you do, Of course, he said to me kind of ruefully, I wish she and I had had that conversation the day her father died. It would have saved us a
Right.
lot of money.
Right. I know. All right, moving on. Book of the week.
Are you sure you can take it?
Well, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe it's a really bad book.
Well,
I don't know. I can't answer this, Charles. What?
There's always that possibility, isn't there? But this week we are going to do something very unusual, peculiar, and dare I say, bizarre.
Okay, go on.
The Morte by Sir Thomas Malory. The Death of Arthur. Now, Malory is available in many modern English translations, and feel free to use them. This is the basic version of the Arthurian legend in English. There are older versions that differ significantly, and those are all worthwhile. But to really get your feet wet as a semi-introduction, I recommend the Morte in a modern English version. But, oh no, I'll do that next week. At any rate, the great thing about Malory, if I can find a thing very quickly online, is the way he ends this book. Morte. Let me see if I can get
15th century Middle English prose.
Yes, but they have a lot of versions of it in modern English. I mean, lots. Even on the library, I'm looking at one now. Le Morte d'Auteur, edited with introduction, etc., etc. The authorship and manner of the book, and basically, you read this, you'll have an introduction to the whole Arthurian legend. There are stories that aren't in it, like Sir Gawain and the Green Knight and things like that. But Sir Thomas Malory gives you the basic outline of the stories. It gives you the Grail. This is the mature version, as you might say, of the Arthurian legend. from which you can add on things like Gawain and the Green Knight, because you know who Sir Gawain is. But this, the way he ends it, it's always done in the modern English. It's done in Gothic lettering, and it sort of semi Middle English writing. And I remember when I was, I guess, 10 years old, and I read it, and I came down to this, and it says, "Thus endeth the noble and joyous book entitled the Morte, notwithstanding it treateth of the birth, life, and acts of the said King Arthur, of his noble knights of the Round Table, their marvelous quests and adventures, the coming of the Sangreal, and in the end the dolorous death and departing out of this world of them all. Which book was reduced to English by Sir Thomas Malory, Knight, as before is said, and by me bound in 21 books." That's from Caxton. This is the last paragraph of Malory. "Here is the end of the whole book of King Arthur, and of his noble knights, that when they were together there was ever 140. And here is the end of the death of Arthur. I pray you all, gentlemen and gentlewomen, that read this book of Arthur and his knights from the beginning to the ending. Pray for me while I am living, that God send me good deliverance. And when I am dead, I pray you all pray for my soul. For this book was ended the 9th year of the reign of King Edward IV by Sir Thomas Malory, Knight, as Jesu help him for his great might, as he is the servant of Jesu both day and night."
Sounds good.
It is. So read it, ladies and gentlemen. And next week, you may find Malory and Le Morte d'Arthur a little bit difficult to read, even in modern English. But fear not, because I have another introductory book for you next week, not just to Arthur, although it includes Arthur. So stay tuned for next week. I'll have a book that will provide a wonderful introduction for you to all kinds of wondrous things that you should know about if you're an educated person and have an IQ higher than your age.
Okay. I'll see if I can put that on the Tumblr House bookstore too. If it's as prolific as you're saying it is, I should be able to have access to it. So.
Oh, I'm sure you'll find a version for sale.
Great.
As you will next week. It's one of those books that never goes out of print.
Absolutely. Okay. All you patrons, get free shipping on your orders. If you're not a patron, become a patron. Get early access. Get access to the pre-show. Get free shipping in the bookstore. All right.
Act now while supplies last.
Limited time offer.
Sorry, those VODs.
Void were prohibited.
Operators are standing by.
Batteries not included.
Some assembly required.
Your favorite one that you've got off of is "Be the First on Your Block." I've never heard that one. I think that's an old-timey one.
It is an old-timey one. But yours was not an actor.
Not an actor. Yeah. All right. Memes of production.
Nationalize the memes of production.
For the common good. All right, we have a proper meme from Superfan Mary. This is kind of a rough one. I don't know what to say, so I'll put it on the screen. From Eternal Memory TV. Father Mitch Pacqua says God's punishment upon the iniquities of ancient Rome was turning them into Italians. Ooh.
That's hard. But well, wait a minute. Can you say that it was such a punishment for Dante to be Dante instead of Dantios Sagliarios?
Wait, what? What did you say? Is punishment for Dante to be Dante as compared to Dante.
Dante's Agliarios.
I don't know what you're asking.
Well, what I'm asking is, wasn't it better for Dante to be a modern Italian than to be an ancient Roman?
Yes. I don't.
All right. Well, so being a modern Italian isn't so bad, is it?
No, it's not so bad at all. But surely
Would
our
would Perry Como have been better as one of the Caesars?
Wow, that's a strange question, Charles.
Well, could you
I would
imagine
doubt it.
Dean
I would
Martin,
highly doubt it.
Dean Martin in the Roman Senate? Friends,
Ooh.
Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. Anybody got any more of that Falernian wine? Frank Sinatra as Tribune.
Okay, you're doing this thing where you're saying, okay, just I'm picturing
I'm
too
helping.
many. I don't like the images you're putting in my mind right now. I don't like it. It's on par with John Wayne playing Genghis Khan right now. Like it's
How about cross-dressing Winston Churchill?
Well, that one's fun.
All right. So what's wrong with John Wayne playing Genghis Khan? Gee, princess, you're awful pretty when you're wrathful.
One is goofy, the other is nails on a chalkboard. I don't know why such is the sensation, but that's the way I'm receiving it.
Okay, well, what about Dean Martin addressing the Roman Senate?
That's like a bad Hollywood movie. That's just like that's really bad.
Okay, Frank Sinatra and Ben-Hur.
That's not as bad. That just sort of like has Ben-Hur though? No, just no.
Annette Funicello is Caesar's wife.
I actually don't know who that is.
Oh, okay. Frankie Avalon is Caesar.
No.
No. So my point is aren't you glad they're all modern Italians and not Romans?
Yes.
So how is that a punishment?
I don't know. Some people, they just, they hate. They just have this hatred in their heart toward the rich and vibrant Italian culture, and they're jealous. Honestly, it comes down to jealousy, I think.
Jealousy.
Yeah.
All right. Who would you rather have seen, Nero as Nero or Al Capone?
Dang. I would say I have to say Al Capone. I'm guilty as charged.
You'd rather see Al Capone as Nero?
Oh, I thought you said I thought you're asking me if I was willing to see Nero, like real life Nero or real life Al Capone, like meet, as in like meet IRL.
Oh, no. The question is, would you rather see Nero play Nero or Al Capone play Nero?
Well, I don't know who Nero is. I mean, Nero, like, who's like Nero playing Nero? What is that?
The evil emperor. Not Nero Wolfe. He was different. And he was Montenegrin, not Italian. Nero was the emperor of Rome. He was the one who began persecuting the Christians.
Yeah, but I feel like I have less details to sort of fill in that picture to make that judgment.
He fiddled while Rome burned. Literally.
Yeah, obviously that's the anecdote, but
sounds like Al Capone did not fiddle while Rome burned.
See, whereas like Al Capone, I have a lot to work with. Like I have Robert De Niro's portrayal in The Untouchables. There's a lot there.
No, I knew a fellow whose daddy was a cop on the east side of Chicago back in the bad old days, back in the USA. In the heat of a summer night, in the land of the dollar bill, where the town of Chicago died, and they talk about it still. When a man named Al Capone tried to make that town his own, so he called his gang to war against the forces of the law. The night Chicago died. My mother prayed the night Chicago died. Brother, what a fight it really was. Brother, what a night it really was. Yes, indeed. I heard my mama cry. I heard her pray the night Chicago died.
Wow.
You're not impressed? You know what's funny about that song?
What?
Well, there are a couple of liberties taken because, as you know, there's no east side of Chicago. That'd be Lake Michigan. And it was composed by 3 Englishmen from the town of Nottingham, where I was recently. They were a band called Paper Lace back in the 70s. So they did Billy Don't Be a Hero, which went to the top 10, and The Night Chicago Died. They came from Nottingham to the United States to play. And notice one of their songs is about the Civil War, the other about Chicago, and they knew nothing about U.S. history. Nevertheless, that's what they did. And they actually wrote to Chicago Mayor Richard Daley Sr., asking for an endorsement of the song The Night Chicago Died. And he wrote back, are you people nuts? But they made a ton of money, and then they came and they went back to Nottingham, and they are still performing all these years later, the same 3 guys.
Wow. That's weird.
Isn't that strange?
Yeah.
But that's the story of The Night Chicago Died. It was more English than Chicago Italian.
All right.
Does that make you feel better about Al Capone?
No. So who would you rather meet, Al Capone or Nero, in person?
Al Capone. Al Capone.
Okay, good. I don't feel bad then. Okay, because I thought that was the question, and I thought,
no.
I thought you were trying to gauge whether I was ain't gonna be ancient or modern. Like I had to pick.
No. I wouldn't do that to anybody. I wouldn't do it to myself. I'd take Al Capone any day. Although the late lamented Henry Beckman, who was the father of my dear friend, the late lamented Stu Beckman, and a very close friend of my dad's, and they were going to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts together in the late 40s, was on a episode of Night Gallery called Tearing Down Tim Riley's Bar.
Mm-hmm.
And he plays the local cop. And he and William Wyndham, who plays Randy something or other, who's having the weird visions in the deserted bar, he says, yes, back in those days, they're reminiscing about 30 years before, 25 years before, in the 40s. He says, when I started as a policeman, my ambition was to catch Al Capone. That's what I wanted to do. So they keep on talking, and he says, the old policeman says, now I'm counting the days to retirement. I walk a lot slower. I'm slow as molasses. And this and that goes on. Then he goes, but I'm still faster than Al Capone. Given that Capone had been dead for 35 years by that time, but Mr. Beckman was faster than Al Capone all the years that I know him. Is that encouraging?
Yes. All right, questions. And so we're going to start off with a bunch of questions from Top Floor Executive Don from Florida.
Yeah, boss.
So when Top Floor Executive Don speaks, you listen. You hear?
I bark.
Okay. So he says, greetings from the executive floor, where we are dealing with some complaints about the Tumbler House gift shop. Apparently, some of the employees are dissatisfied with what is in stock, given their 2022 bonus was an IOU at the gift shop.
Cheap.
The inventory of alarm clocks, road maps, film strips, floppy disks, and bill cream was not well received, although the 1978 edition of Encyclopedia Britannica was a hot item. Unfortunately, it was missing volumes 8 to 12. The task of keeping the gift shop well-stocked with in-demand items continues to be top priority for the executive floor. Don Vincenzo assured me of this as he was entering the meditation gardens. All right.
Yeah, but Don Vincenzo can't control what trucks stop suddenly in front of the tower, can they?
I mean, that's true. I can't control such a thing.
I mean, how do you know when the next truck full of toasters is going to stop suddenly in Huntington and First Avenue? You can't tell.
No. So anyhow, his question, he says, one of my favorite philosophy books is Aristotle Nicomachean. Is that how you say it? Nicomachean?
Nicomachean.
Nicomachean ethics, particularly the topic of the doctrine of the mean. Will Charles please go through the exercise of naming a world leader, whether royal, political, church, business, or from any other walk of life, who best exemplified each of Aristotle's moral virtues he classified as in the mean, and why? All right. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Number 1, generosity or liberality?
I would say Franz Josef of Austria-Hungary.
On what basis? That's interesting.
It contributed a ton of money to the Catholic Church in the United States, in Egypt, in the Holy Land, in Turkey, in what's now Sudan, without expecting any political advantage from it, which was good because he didn't get any.
All right, magnificence.
Louis XIV, Versailles, etc., etc.
Is that the Sun King?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Magnanimity.
Oddly enough, Emperor Karl of Austria-Hungary, because he forgave everybody who did him in.
Industriousness or proper ambition. That's interesting. I feel that's a bigger list.
Yeah, there are a lot of people I could put on that list. Oddly enough, Franz Josef would definitely be one of them because he worked constantly. But getting away from Austria, Theodore Roosevelt.
Okay. Gentleness or meekness? Wow.
Mary Queen of Scots.
Friendliness or amiability?
Ronald Reagan.
Sincerity.
Liberace. No.
I know you hate that word in a sense, because sincere, because everyone's sincere, right? Like, what does that mean? Like,
Charles V, Emperor Charles V.
And lastly, last one, wittiness or geniality? Witty.
Well, Winston Churchill, I guess.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think with royalty, you don't. It's like they don't go that avenue because they don't need to be witty per se, or like they don't need to. I don't know.
No.
It's interesting, right? Like they don't need to impress. They don't need to be clever to move up in someone's
No.
regard. Like you're already royalty. So that's interesting. Okay, that's it. That was. I'm pleased that you really seemed like you had to jog your brain there. a lot for some of these. So good challenge for
Oh.
Charles. Another question from Don. He says, I am familiar with the modern red mass for Catholic lawyers and white mass for Catholic medical professionals. But could Charles please explain the history of the guild masses in medieval Europe?
Well, yeah, the red mass, first and foremost, was and is a mass, a votive mass of the Holy Ghost. And so it was used not just for the opening of the legal year, which is what we tend to have it for now, to call the Holy Ghost down upon the judges and lawyers, but also for the opening of the parliamentary year. So when Parliament would come into session, and when I say Parliament, I don't just mean the British Parliament, the English medieval Parliament, I mean France, Spain, everywhere. When their parliaments would come into session, they would be preceded by a Mass of the Holy Ghost for the same reason. But with the guilds, one of the requirements, every guild had a patron saint. So St. Crispin is the patron of shoemakers. So every year on the feast of St. Crispin, all the different, and there'd be a St. Crispin's guild, a guild of shoemakers in every city dedicated to St. Crispin. And so one of the requirements, there were others like, contributing money for widows and orphans of shoemakers and money for the activities of the guild and all sorts of things like that. And usually in many places, various of the guilds would undertake to do something for the celebration of one or more feasts of the church year. And they would very often maintain a chapel in the city church or the cathedral or whatever. But one of the requirements of belonging to the guild was to attend mass every year for the feast of the guild's patron. So if we still had that sort of a setup today, all of the shoemakers in Arcadia would go to to Holy Angels for the Mass of St. Crispin. And then probably they'd get a sermon about the place of the faith and the life of the shoemaker and so on. Or, whichever saint. But that was that annual, and very often they'd receive communion together. And then it would be followed by some kind of banquet.
How do we get to that? How do we get to that place again?
Well, you could always start depending on what your employment is. Like, how would you describe what you do for a living? What would you say you do? What are you?
White collar. I sit at a desk and I do the correct button, the mouse button clicks and the keyboard clicks, and the combination which I do is very effective.
So you'd say you're a manager?
Yeah, I'm a manager, sure.
Okay. All right. Well, first thing we do, Catholic Managers Guild. You find out if there is Catholic Professionals Guilds. Yep. Catholic Professionals Guilds.
I don't know. There's a lot of upstarts that aren't fully developed, Charles. I'm a little leery of these types of things. There's a lot of
So what you do is you look into them and see if they're worthwhile, but you don't know unless you look. So let me see. Aviation Association of Catholic Media. This is in Ghana, by the way. These are the Catholic Professionals Guilds. It's in Ghana. The IT Professionals Guild. That would be you. IT
That's
Professionals, latest news, etc. That's in Ghana though, so it wouldn't do you any good. But
because like this Young Catholic Professionals, like that's an actual, I don't know, it's a corporation. It's not like an organic grouping of people. Like these are people who are trying to sell a subscription.
Well, no,
And
I realize, but what you do is you look around, firstly, to see if there's anybody that is doing anything like that.
yeah.
Now, let's say there isn't. Okay, now, do you know any other Catholics who are in your kind of work?
Like two or three.
All right.
I mean, not really. I mean, kind of, but not really.
No, hold on. Before you start naysaying, okay? I mean, remember, you can shoot anything down. Any idea can be shot in the cradle. And that way you don't have to worry about doing anything. But I'm trying to figure something out. I'm thinking on the fly right now. Okay, now the patron saint of the internet is, I think, St. Maximin Colbert. Might be Carlo Acutis, but he's not a saint yet. St. Isidore of Seville. He was named patron of the internet. Okay. So St. Isidore of Seville is the patron saint of the internet. Although it looks like Carlo Acutis may catch up eventually. But right now, St. Isidore of Seville. So, what was St. Isidore of Seville's feast day? April 4th. All right. So what you do is you invite anybody and everybody you know in your profession to Mass with you on that given day.
Interesting. Okay.
And, most of them will say no. But you see, you don't need most. Because those two or three who'll show, they know people who are A, interested in the faith, and B, do what you do for a living. Now, of course, it might be it's a total failure. But I promise if you don't try, it definitely will fail. I may not actually even get out of this chair and get to the door. I may fall. I may have a heart attack. But I guarantee you, if I don't try to get to the door, I'm not going to make it.
Yeah, I think maybe it's just too limiting when it's too narrow when you reduce it to Catholic, perhaps. I don't know. There's just not a lot. I've actually gone to young professionals in the area. There's a lot of actual grassroots ones. It's actually pretty fun. It's just going to a brewery and having a beer together and networking and.
I get it.
But
how would you get them to go venerate St. Isidore of Seville with you?
I don't think that question has an answer in the current modern America. Yeah, because the answer is no to 99.99%.
It's the 0.9 or the 0.1 or whatever you've got left that you want to look at. Remember, history is created by determined minorities. It's not done by the majority. The majority simply lay back and take whatever they're given and eat it, and they're made to like it. And you know how I know this? I saw how the majority were made to accept abortion and queer marriage. I saw the whole thing. And trust me when I tell you that 50 years ago, they would have told you it's not possible. I would have told you 50 years ago it wasn't possible. But I learned because determined minorities really were more interested in getting their stuff across than the majority were, and they're not getting it across. So the majority rolled over and took it. Woohoo! And so we are where we are now. Filled with love. Love wins. Again.
There's a lot to unpack. I could talk about this for hours, but the challenges between generations, it's a weird thing because
4 letters.
What?
L-O-V-E.
All right. You know what? Oh, wow. Let's move to the next question. Yeah, okay, that's good. All right, Don says, finally, I would be remiss if I did not assist Charles in deepening his love and affection. Ooh. You're all about love and affection, right, Charles?
I am. Okay. I'm filled with it. I ooze love. I reek of love. I wallow in love.
Okay, so Don's going to help you deepen your love and affection for your newly discovered roots by telling you about all of the amazing Italian-American feasts brought here by immigrants like Charles's family members over a century ago. Don says, I would encourage Charles to visit some of these and be better acclimated with the rich Catholic traditions upheld to this day by the great Italian-American peoples. He provided quite an extensive list, but I feel like reading all of it. And so I will.
Okay.
Ugh.
All right.
Number 1. Our Lady of Mount Carmel Feast in Hamilton, New Jersey, going on since 1875. Number 2, the St. Peter's Fiesta in Gloucester, Massachusetts, going back to 1927. The Santa Lucia Festival in Omaha, Nebraska, started in 1925. The St. Anne's Festival of Hoboken started 113 years ago. Hoboken, yeah.
Hoboken.
Okay. The Our Lady of Mount Carmel Feast of aforementioned East Harlem, founded in 1908.
We talked about the Church of Our Lady of Harlem. I mean, of Our Lady of Mount Carmel in Harlem.
That's right.
I'm contributing, by the way. I'm going to put something on the discussion there to help.
Okay, beautiful. The Santa Rosalia Feast of Brooklyn, which goes back to the early 17th century in Palermo, Sicily.
Rosalia,
excuse me. Beautiful. Charles scoured the internet for a picture of rigatoni. Beautiful. I hope that wasn't too hard to find, Charles. You probably just needed to type in the word rigatoni and then search Google Images. Okay.
Yes.
Next one, Cleveland's Feast of the Assumption celebration, which is now in its 124th year. Next, the San Rocco Feast celebration of Aliquippa, Pennsylvania, now in its 98th year. Our Lady of Mount Carmel in Newark, going on 133 years running. The St. Ubaldo Feast and Running of the Saints in Jessup, Pennsylvania, started in 1909. Then finally there is a Festa e Tutti I Feste, or the Feast of All Feasts, San Gennaro of Manhattan, which is now 97 years running, featuring the celebration of the miracles of St. Januarius and traces its roots centuries ago in Naples, Italy. Wow.
Can I add one?
Sure.
The Feast of St. Joseph at St. Peter's Italian Church in downtown Los Angeles.
Beautiful. I agree.
How do you like that rigatoni?
That's rigatoni, all right. That's rigatoni with looks like some classic tomato sauce and some cheese. Okay.
But wait, there's more. You know, one of the places, if as and when I get home, I'm going to go straight away, is Domenico's. You know that.
Domenico's Italian food isn't that great, Charles. I hate to tell you this. Maybe to a non-Italian it's great, but I got to take you to some real Italian. I bet you like Petrillo's pasta too. Their pizza's good, but
I do like Petrillo's pasta, actually.
But look, I need to get you to have some pasta genovese or some bolognese from Grano Italian Ristorante. So, anyhow.
What about the Olive Garden?
Okay. Next question from the Mad Sicilian Rob.
Wait, look. I
I
sent you something else.
I know, the St. Joseph. Wow, that's actually a really beautiful St. Joseph's table. Good job, guys. That's probably St. Peter's.
From St. Peter's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, I'll show that one.
You're not going to show the rigatoni.
It's just rigatoni. Oh, it's just. There's a beautiful St. Joseph's table, St. Peter's. Really, really nice.
Yeah, it is.
All right.
One of the things I miss a lot about LA is St. Joseph's table at St. Peter's Italian Church.
All right, Rob, another Paisan. He says, "Hello, gentlemen. This question may seem a little more personal. Thank you for your indulgence. Growing up, I don't recall ever visiting a cemetery. I was blessed in that my grandparents all survived into my 30s. But my dad is gone since 2017, right about the time I first corresponded with Don Vincenzo. I still recall your kindness. My question is, what do I do at the cemetery? I typically pray a rosary and sit for a bit. Are there other traditional prayers for this? What about flowers? It seems counterintuitive to buy a vase, which would break in the elements. Thank you and God bless." That's a good question.
It's a very good question, and the answer is, well, number one, of course, there's nothing wrong with bringing flowers, and you're right about the vase. It's never made any point to me, and it's not like the flowers are going to last all that long, but it's good to bring flowers. The rosary is always a good thing, especially the sorrowful mysteries, but I can recommend the Dies Irae and the De Profundis, which you can say for the dead in particular. There are a lot of prayers for the holy souls that you can find online. And you can have a mass offered for your dead anytime. And if you do it and then you go visit them at the cemetery, it'll add something extra. When I go to see my dad's grave, my mom's, although Dad's been dead longer, so I started with him. I have a very private. It's not even a devotion. He and I used to sing Danny Boy together. My dad and I. We sang a lot of songs together, Annie Laurie and so on. But I always sing the second verse of Danny Boy when I'm at my dad's grave. When you come back and all the flowers dying, and I am dead, as dead I well may be, you'll come and find the place where I am lying, and kneel and say an Ave there for me. And I shall hear those soft who tread above me, and all my grave shall sweeter, warmer be, if you will come and tell me that you love me. I'll sleep in peace until you come again to me. So, in addition to the prayers and everything else, think of them, talk to them, say whatever you would say if they were alive. Don't expect a response, and if you get one, run. Well, it's hard. I mean, one of the things that's interesting about your relationship with your elders is that they can know you better than you could ever know them. But they can't know the world you actually live in. You, on the other hand, through history and all that, can come to understand the world they inhabited better than they could, but you'll never know them. That's that partiality is a product of time and our fallen condition. But I'm sure everyone at some point has wondered what it would be like if he could suddenly magically appear in the past and go drinking with his dad when you were both 21. What the old man would have been like then. I don't think there's anyone who's close to his father who hasn't wondered what it would be like if he could have known him on an even keel, as it were. There's a Twilight Zone episode where the man is really, he's an executive in New York, and he's had it up to here, and he can't take it anymore, he thinks, and so he drives off to his old hometown where he hadn't been in 20 years, and to his shock and awe, he's driven back to it. He walks to it, actually. His car breaks down, so he walks 1.5 miles to the town. But he's walked. Remember, this is set in 1961, so it's 1935, and he's a boy again. He isn't, but I mean, that's where he was.
Yeah.
And he meets the young him, and his much younger father, younger mother, and all that. And of course, he frightens he tries to tell himself to have a good time, but the kid's just frightened of the weird guy. And the mother is utterly horrified horrified by him. He runs away. They threaten to call the cops. But finally, the father catches up with him, and he's got his wallet, which he had dropped in the confusion. And he says, because he's an adult. He's not the kid that they have at home, right?
Yeah.
And so the mother says, "Don't," because Mom, don't call me that. I don't know who you are, But the father, as I say, finds him, and he says, "I'm not insane. I'm telling you." He says, "I know, son. I've looked through your wallet. I saw the bills from 1960 and 61. I don't know how or why you're here, but I know you're my son." And he says, "Oh, Dad." He says, "Is it really that horrible where you are?" Oh, and he goes, I'll bet you know a lot of things that are going to happen." He says, "Yeah, I know." He doesn't say it. He says, "Well, we'll leave that alone." "Is it really so horrible where you are?" He says, "Oh, Dad, it's miserable. Yeah, I can't get anything done." I said, "Well," he said, "there's no place for you here. You've got to go back, son. Let that boy have his chance to grow up. You have to go back." And he goes, "Yeah, I guess I do, Dad." And so he walks off back toward the gas station, and the father goes home. And then he's back in the present with a highly changed and much more productive attitude. But I'll never forget the actor who played the father. Just I know, son. I know who you are. It's all right. Could you imagine if that happened in real life? And you're presented with your son coming back from the future.
I wouldn't believe it. I'd be like, "What's you're trying to scam me? You're trying to con me. This is some long con."
Well, that's yes, a real long con. No, that was the thing. He because when he's chasing himself falls from a height of some kind, and he's hurt. Well, he ends up with a scar in the place where the kid was hurt.
Right.
So, but it's and actually, the theme was very much like the tearing down Tim Riley's bar, where the same thing happens. The fellow basically goes to his own past, and his own past pushes him to the present. Rod Serling did not one, not two, but three of those sorts of stories with the same theme. The third was The Trouble with Templeton. And there, the guy is an actor, a Broadway actor, who's a bit on the downside, but still highly respected. He's got a second wife who's running around on him. He's not happy with life. But remember this again, it's the early 60s. So the new play that he's supposed to be doing on Broadway doesn't go well. The director treats him like crap, and he runs out the back of the theater, which is the theater he'd performed in when he started out. And he comes running out of the theater, and there are all these people applauding him. He's like, "What?" And then he sees the sign up, whatever the name of the play was, The Big Hit of 1925. And he goes to the speakeasy nearby that he always used to go to, and they're alive again, are his wife and his best friend. But they're changed. They're not pleasant people at all. And finally says, I don't like what you become. I can't stand it. And well, she's been fanning herself with something. So he grabs it and says, "Will you listen to me?" And says, "You're old. You have no place here. Get out." So he leaves, and as he leaves, all their faces drop. Everybody just looks, and he gets back to the theater, and he starts fanning himself with the paper he'd taken from her hand. And he reads it, and he sees that everything they had said to him was on the script. They didn't mean it. It was like a play. They said, they wanted me to come back and to pick up the reins and to really, really live in the present. God bless them. And you see that that's true by the looks on their faces when he leaves. They obviously weren't happy to do what they did. So he goes striding back in, and the director is, now look here, Templeton. He says, no, you look here. From now on, you'll treat me with respect and you'll call me Mr. Templeton, and we're going to give the public one of the best plays they've ever seen in their lives. And everyone else is, and he pulls himself together and he moves on with life. That was a big theme for Rod Serling in both of his series, as the temptation to seek refuge in the past, when no matter how enjoyable it might have been, the present is what you really need to work on.
Yeah. It's a lie too, a little bit. To past. Because you pick moments, but then you think of the broader landscape. Like, for example, for me, it's like I was a really, really nervous person, and there's a lot of things on the side, apart from perhaps special moments. You know what I mean? So again, we tend to at least I tend to idealize my past.
It was all wonderful. It was all wonderful. I know mine was. Did I ever tell you about riding a unicorn?
No, I thought Donald Trump killed all the unicorns behind the San Gabriel Mountains in the Great Massacre of 2017.
He did, but before then, I used to participate in the unicorn runs, and occasionally we'd also do the flying horses. But then Trump killed the magic. That's the real reason he's being indicted for crimes against magic. That's why Harry Potter is going to be the top judge in this case.
That was an old school reference. You said something insane like that back when Trump was president, and we named the episode after it or something.
Yeah, the Great Unicorn Massacre. No, it's true. As I say, I don't mind the government protesting the Navalny trial, and obviously it's a trumped-up case and so on and so forth. But to yap about it being politically motivated, where they're going after the Trumpster.
Well, that's like this delusion that's going. That's like this hallucination, because I heard this sort of strange language with the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court's playing politics. Like, like when the liberals do stuff, when there's something on the left that's being done, that's not political. That's just reality being enacted.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
No, they truly, there's some sort of hallucination there.
No, they believe. Well, see, they believe in a way the conservatives don't. Actually.
Yeah.
The left believe themselves to be all-knowing, all-seeing, and all-righteous.
Yeah.
And that, and facts don't bother them. That's why they created the idea of the hate fact.
Yeah.
That's why they can do such damage to language and not notice or care. Because if reality contradicts them, too bad for reality.
Yeah. So,
oh well.
Anyhow. Okay, on to frustrating politics, on to cool politics. And so for the final question from a person named C, he or she says, "Hello, Vincent and Charles. I was just out on the veranda eating some grits with leftover crawfish etouffee and listening to the show when Charles mentioned that he was a legitimist. Could Charles explain the arguments for and against each side of the debate over French succession?"
Well, Mr. Boudreaux, I'll tell you what. Jambalaya, crawfish pie, and filet gumbo. 'Cause tonight I'm gonna see my cher amigo. Phil Fruccia, pick guitar, and be gay. Son of a gun, gonna have some fun on the bayou. Which reminds me, Monsieur, Mademoiselle, or Madame Boudreaux, if you're Cajun, are you Prairie Cajun or are you Bayou Cajun? You can respond as you wish. Well, it's like this. The House of Bourbon were the kings of France. Now, the main line of the kings of France, the House of Capet, they became extinct, and so a younger branch, the House of Valois, became kings, and they became extinct. And they were followed by the next closest, the House of Bourbon, the first of whom was Henry IV. Henry IV had a son named Louis XIII, and Louis XIII had two sons. One was Louis XIV, the successor. The other was Philippe, the Duc d'Orléans, and he was founder of the House of Orléans, Bourbon-Orléans. Now, it so happened that Louis XIII's wife was named Anne of Austria. She was a Habsburg, Spanish Habsburg, despite her name, because it was the Casa d'Austria, the House of Austria. And Louis XIV also married a Spanish Habsburg princess, the sister of the last king, Maria Teresa. The sister was named Maria Teresa. But her brother was Charles II, the last Habsburg king of Spain. So he died, and Louis XIV was able to convince him to leave his throne to his younger grandson, Philip V, rather than to his next closest Habsburg cousin, Charles of Austria. The result was the famous War of Spanish Succession, or as we called it in the States, St. Anne's War. The end of the result was that although the Austrians got most of the European possessions of the Spanish, the Bourbon kept Spain and the Americas. But at the Treaty of Utrecht, they agreed that no one person could be king of France and king of Spain. So that's a rigid law. And that meant that the Bourbons of Spain could not become kings of France. The Bourbons of France could not be kings of Spain. So you have the younger house, Bourbon-Espagne. All right. Time goes by. Louis XIV's great-grandson becomes the king as Louis XV. He dies. His son predeceases him. And so his grandson, Louis XVI, becomes king. Louis XVI has two brothers. And he's murdered by the revolution. The two brothers succeed one after the other. Louis XVIII, who dies without any sons. Charles X. Charles X has a grandson, Henry V, the Count of Chambord, who is the last unassailable, undoubtable Bourbon of France. You with me so far? Okay.
Yes.
Now, the House of Orléans, that descended from Louis XIV's brother, had played a terrible role in the French Revolution. The Duke of Orléans, Philippe Égalité, he went over to the revolution, voted for the king's murder, and then was beheaded himself. His son, after being rehabilitated by Charles X, betrays him and becomes king in his place in 1830, although he's overthrown himself in 1848. So, meanwhile, the Bourbon of Spain have gone off in several different directions. You remember Carlos III of Spain, for the founder of Los Angeles.
Of course. How could you not?
Well, before he founded Los Angeles, he was the first Bourbon Duke of Parma and the first Bourbon King of the Two Sicilies. And these were all younger branches. So, here now are the House of Bourbon in lines of seniority. In the year of our Lord, 1830. Bourbon of France, Bourbon of Spain, Bourbon of Parma, Bourbon of Two Sicilies, Bourbon Orléans. All right. Now, Here's where it begins to get a little tricky. In 1837, Fernando VII dies. Now, the Salic law of the House of Bourbon meant that only brothers could succeed. It had to be male. So normally his brother Don Carlos would have been king. But Fernando VII wanted his daughter to inherit. And before the Bourbon came to the throne of Spain, they had had reigning women. So he changed the law. That was something that his brother would not accept. Now, one thing you've got to bear in mind that just as the legitimist line of the French House of Bourbon, the main line, when it wasn't just a question with the House of Orleans who had supplanted them as kings, it wasn't just a question of genealogy, but also ideology. Bourbon-Orleans represented liberal monarchy. The legitimate line of the Bourbon represented traditional monarchy. The same thing happened in Spain when they split. The Carlist line stood not just for being the older line, but also for traditional Spanish monarchy. The Cristinos, the junior line, stood for liberal monarchy. All right. So now what do we got? Bourbon, France, the Carlists, and the Cristinos, the older and lesser and the younger line of Spain, Parma, two Sicilies, and Orleans. In 1883, Henry V, the Comte de Chambord, dies. Now, this is a little difficult. It's a little difficult because the son of the usurping Louis Philippe had made things up with the Comte de Chambord, and he was undeniably French. The next senior heir to the French throne was the Carlist claimant, who had an on-again, off-again civil war with the younger line in Spain. So a small minority of the French legitimists declared that he was the rightful king of France as well as Spain, although he had control over neither. But most of them joined the Orleans. They were the Orleanists. And this was made easier by the fact that Philippe, that being the Orleans at the time, was much more traditional in his approach to monarchy than his father or grandfather had been. All right. Fast forward. Most French royalists support Orleans, but a few legitimists do not. Then the Carlist line, the older Spanish line, becomes extinct in 1936. Well, this leads to a couple of interesting problems. The King of Spain, the younger king who was deposed, Alfonso XIII, had two sons, Don Jaime and Don Juan. Now, Don Jaime was blind and deaf, so it was figured he would never reproduce. They wouldn't have no kids. So his father got him to renounce the throne of Spain, which he did. The Carlists, in the meantime, because of another old law in Spain, which held that any branch of the ruling house who had taken up arms against the legitimate king could never assume the throne. Normally, Alfonso and his descendants would have been the next in line after the Carlists. But the Carlist supporters refused to have anything to do with them because, as far as they were concerned, they were usurpers. So they looked to Bourbon Parma as the head of the Carlists. But those few French legitimists who had been loyal to the head of the Carlists switched their allegiance to Don Jaime, the eldest son of the King of Spain, who had given up his rights to Spain, but not France, and who surprised everybody by getting married and having a kid. So that kid, Don Alfonso, Monseigneur Alphonse, he revived the legitimist cause in France in the 1960s and 70s. And he was helped in this by the fact that the Orleanist heir the Comte de Paris, the old Comte, was very close to de Gaulle and was very Republican in some ways, and then did a lot of stupid things. So he lost a lot of support through his own behavior, just as the Legitimist side was now presenting a more passable air. All right. So then what happened? Well, what then happened was that he died. Alphonse died in 1989. Freak accident. He was beheaded. His son, the Duc d'Anjou, Louis XX, has become the focus of a much larger and much more active Legitimist side of French royalism. They were helped, as I say, by the missteps of the House of Orléans, who disaffected a number of their followers. The old Comte de Paris dies. His son, who divorced his wife and did some various other things, was close to the Freemasons for a while. It really turned off a lot of people, but pulled himself together and became a much more credible candidate. And then he died, I guess, 3 years ago. But here's the funny thing. A few months before he died, he attempted to consecrate France to the Sacred Heart, which, I mean, as far as the Legitimists are concerned, is nice, but since he wasn't the rightful king, it wouldn't matter. But it's a nice try. And also the Legitimist era said he would love to do it, but only with all the bishops of France. Whereas the Comte de Paris attempted to do it as a solo deal. But he put the Sacred Heart on the coat of arms and everything that St. Margaret Marie Alacoque had asked for. Well, then, on January the 21st, a couple of years ago, he was getting ready to go to the annual Mass, the Requiem Mass for Louis XVI. And he suddenly felt unwell. So he didn't go, and then he died. So his son Jean, the Duc de Vendôme, became Count of Paris and heir to the Orleanese claims. So now you have Louis the 20th or Jean II, Louis the 20th or John II, the Duke of Anjou, the Count of Paris, the Comte de Paris. So what are the strengths and weaknesses? Well, without a doubt, the Duc d'Anjou is the senior heir of the House of Bourbon. Now that has been established by the French courts. There's no question of it. His opponents would say, well, yes, but the Treaty of Utrecht would preclude his becoming king. Well, the problem with that, of course, is the Treaty of Utrecht was meant to keep one man from being king of France and Spain. And because his grandfather renounced his rights to Spain, he's a Frenchman, even though he was born in Spain and all that. Contrary-wise, the Comte de Paris, who after his father died, all mention of the Sacré-Cœur, the Sacred Heart, vanished from the website and everything. Nevertheless, he certainly is the head of the House of Orléans, and you know, if the Duc d'Anjou is not the rightful king of France, then the Comte de Paris is. Politically, they have a lot in common. They both came out against gay marriage. They both came out in support of the yellow vests, and l'Action Française, particularly because of their founder Charles Maurras's deep nationalism, have always supported the House of Orléans precisely because they are indisputably French. And I like l'Action Française, but I'm a Legitimist. That being said, though, I know that the Comte de Paris got into a fight with the Fondation Saint-Louis, who were the holding company his grandfather created for the remaining family property. And they basically evicted him from his own home. And that, I think, is a terrible thing. I'm not a supporter of him as King of France, but I certainly support his right to his family's properties. And there we have it.
All right. Thank you for that, Charles.
Does that all make sense?
It all makes sense. Thank you for mapping that out for us. It's very involved.
It is, and it covers not one, not two, but actually three countries. If you consider, I didn't even touch on the Bourbons of the two Sicilies, who are your ancestral kings, who have a dynastic fight of their own, which is all the more annoying because that one got patched up. The Duke of Calabria and the Duke of Castro, after their multiple great-grandmother, Maria Cristina de Savoia, was beatified, they ended their feud. And because the Duke of Castro has no male heirs, they agreed that Calabria's son would be the ultimate heir. And, they have there are several knightly orders and all that pertaining, the Constantinians, the most famous, pertaining to the crown of the two Sicilies. Well, the two claimants have their own orders. And even the Holy See recognizes this weird situation because they have one church in Rome for one and another for the other. San Giorgio and Santa Croce in Milvio. So they refused to decide between the legitimacy of the two. So they fixed up an agreement. Everything was fine. But then the Duke of Castro decides to go against the Salic law and declare his oldest daughter as heir. And he, once again, had to be screwed up, couldn't be left alone. Thanks very much, Your Majesty.
That was dumb. Why did he? That's ridiculous. I thought it was going to be a happy ending.
It was a happy ending for a little while, but rumor has it that his wife pushed him into it.
Yeah, well, because he went back on his word. I thought they had an agreement.
They did, and he did.
Cherche la femme, am I right?
Always.
Gosh.
So remember, ladies and gentlemen, if you're going to be a king, don't marry a pushy chick. Especially if you've got dynastic issues that really need to be solved.
That's good advice. All we need is several important people to hear this, and it'll be worth it.
Well, I mean, honestly, when that agreement came, because see, the people who were members of the two orders were not happy with being separated like that. And during that year or two of the agreement, oh man, did they love getting together. And it was agreed that both orders would recognize each other, both sets of orders, equal parity, same order, etc., etc. It was great. It was wonderful. And now this. So he didn't do his followers any great favors. I hope his wife's happy.
What's his name?
I'm not saying.
Did you say Castro?
The Duke of Castro.
Okay.
And mind you, everyone I know who's met him says he's a wonderful individual, and I'm sure that's true. But this was a terrible occurrence.
I could see it. Okay. Yeah. Oh. All right.
So my advice, not that I'm Neapolitan, which I'm not, but although actually I do have Palermo blood, so I can speak as a part Sicilian. And frankly, I say, ladies and gentlemen, let's all pretend that the original agreement stands. When the Duke of Castro unfortunately shuffles off this mortal coil, we can all recognize Calabria or Calabria's male heir, and anyone who doesn't like the Salic law can become a Republican. That's all you have to do.
That's
declare
fair.
For the Republic, and you don't have a problem.
That's fair.
If you don't like the price of being a monarch, great, be a Republican. Now, the fact that you count for no more than the rest of your fellow slaves, that's your own fault. I mean, when you consider what trouble Fernando VII put Spain in by insisting on his daughter succeeding him, and she was a little girl. His brother, as he showed by the way he conducted things during the First Carlist War, his brother would have been quite capable of governing a Spain not riven by civil war. The same was true in Portugal with Pedro IV and Don Miguel. Leave it alone. Leave it bloody alone. Unfortunately, those guys were willing to push for civil war in order to alter the laws of succession. Later kings would not go for civil war. And the price was their people being ruled by republics. I think, of course, I didn't live through World War II, so that's why Umberto II refused to plunge the country into civil war, because Italy had been bled white, and they'd had enough of it. So when the armed forces said to him, "Well, Your Majesty, everybody knows this thing was rigged. If you want, we'll disregard it and finita la commedia." And his response was, "Well, if you do that, there'll be a civil war with the Reds. And it's just not worth it to me. The crown is not worth plunging the country even deeper into misery." With 2020 hindsight, we can ask ourselves if Italy really would have been better off or worse off. But unfortunately, people are not equipped with 2020 hindsight living when they live. All they can do is what they know to do from what they can see.
All right. It's been a long episode. That Legitimist content was really saved the best for last, definitely, on this episode. So thank you for that, Charles. Any final words? Yeah.
A couple. Let me point out one important thing. There is a particular kind of pasta that is dishonest by its very nature.
I don't know. What is it?
Well, Tony was the one who rigged it. Rigatoni.
Oh, man, Charles, that's bad. That's just bad.
Was that tortured? That was tortured until it talked. All right, fine. We'll try something better. Are you ready?
Ready.
You think you can dig it?
Yeah.
All right. If it's off the menu.
It's Monday?
And if your soul is saved. It's not working.
You broke it.
Yeah, I did. All right. The soul you save
may be your own.
All right, ladies and gents, we'll see you next week.
See you next week.